Sweet, dude. Yeah, man. How's your day going?
Pretty good. Busy day. I went into the dealership today and their computer system's down, so I can't upload any of the pictures I was taking. And it doesn't really make sense for me to shoot pictures if I can't upload them because cars sell relatively quickly. And if I'm just going to be shooting cars that are selling the next day, it's just like a waste of my time.
Yeah.
So, I just left and then came back home and started working on a bunch of personal stuff while I figure that out.
Yeah. Fair enough, right? Like,
yeah.
Can't control what you can't control. So, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Other than that, we went out to an area just east of here called Sand Mountain.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a giant ass sand dune.
Sand Mountain, it sounds like that's what it should be. So,
yeah. I mean, gosh, I don't even know. Probably it's like hundreds of feet tall. There's a bunch of dune buggies and stuff out there, but we took our cat out there in the Jeep and like drove through the dunes on the lower section. There was a lot of moisture underneath the base layer of sand, and so we didn't have to worry about sinking too much. But yeah, we like parked next to the actual mountain and like hiked up to the top of the dune with the cat in a backpack, and then just like let him out at the top of the dune. He was like chasing us around and stuff. It was pretty cool.
Wow, that's super interesting. So your cat's just cool with that. He's good with the car, all those things.
He's 5 months old. We got him from my family back in September when he was like 3.5, 4 months old. So, we've had him for only 2 months, but we've already brought him out on a bunch of adventures and stuff. And the whole trick to that is like starting him out super young so that it's not this like shocking thing to them. And so we've been, really adamant about like putting him in his harness since he was a little kitten and just like playing with him with the harness on, so that he just is used to it. So now he like totally doesn't care that it's on. He'll cruise around. At first he was really clumsy. He like would put on the vest and he just kind of like get stiff armed on the couch and just like fall off the couch. He was almost like being dramatic about it. It was really funny.
Yeah.
And we're also like giving him baths and stuff too, so that he's used to water. The next big thing, he's getting big. So we're having to get a new backpack so that he can like just chill on the backpack with his head and paws out and he can like look around. And then we like put him on the leash, and we actually were able to keep him off the leash on the dune this time. And he just kind of like ran in between us. I've got this cute video of him like charging up the sand dune towards me. It's pretty cute.
Yeah, that's super cool and really bizarre to me because I've never had cats that we have tried to do that with. So the one cat we've got now, Tigger, he's like 16. So, and he hates cars and stuff. So like good luck if I ever tried to do that now, like the classic, you can't teach an old dog new tricks kind of thing. His adventure days are behind him. He's cool with just, being Tigger and lying on the bed and stuff. So, but yeah, that's really interesting. Pretty cool that you can do that with your cat and you guys are like, conditioning him to be able to enjoy that.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I'd say the road trip out is always the most stressful. He like is super uncomfortable. And at first he's super chill, but like 20 minutes in, he just starts screaming, like really loud meows. And it's really hard to not get pissed off and just like throw him in the back seat and just be like, shut the fuck up. but we've learned that just ignoring him and just like keeping him away from the front seat while he's being loud as like a sort of punishment. It's like, all right, like you can come up here, but only if you're quiet. So like once he gets quiet, we let him come up and we got a little bed for him and then he chills there. But if he gets loud, we pick him up, put it back in the back seat and block him off. And so we just kind of like the whole thing, at least I've noticed with cats, is repetition. You just have to like stay firm with this like behavior that you want to see out of them. And they're going to test you tens and tens of times over multiple weeks. But after a while, they just get it and they just stop. And so he's getting better and definitely on the way back from the dune after the entire day of adventuring, he just like passed out and like didn't complain at all. So, yeah, he's a good boy.
Yeah. You tuckered him out. Yeah. That's
for sure.
That's super cool, man. I just could never imagine taking a cat to a sand dune, so there's so many things about that, even just the fact that we don't have sand dunes here. So there's like so many things removed in that I'm like, this is a really interesting experience. Yeah,
it's cool. He thought it was like a giant litter box. He took the fattest shit on the top of it and just like buried
it. Yeah, his perspective, he's like, why do these guys bring me to this huge toilet? Like, I don't get it. Yeah.
He was like trying to dig and like this, he was on such a steep slope that the sand would kept like filling in the hole that he was trying to dig. And you could just see like how perplexed he was. It was really funny. Nice, dude. Yeah, that's basically what's up with me. What's new with you?
just more of the same. It was my birthday last week, the 24th. And that was
happy birthday.
That was very, thanks, man. It was really uneventful. I actually went to the gym and just warmed up and had this big twinge in my back and then was like, oh my God, my back's kind of pulled. And like, that was my birthday present to myself. So yeah, it wasn't very eventful. Not that I'm doing too many eventful things. So just been studying and taking it easy and stuff here with Ray, and it's been okay. So yeah, that's it. Nothing exciting in the last week. Yeah.
It's all good, man. It's the yin and the yang. We've got to have both. And this injury's definitely sent us into the the yin. And just trying to bask in it, just accept
for sure.
Where we are
I'm
at the moment.
marinating in the yin at this point. Everyone, this is one of your co-hosts, Max Carrier. I just want to say thanks so much for tuning in. In today's episode, it is episode 2. We are going to be exploring the accident that happened to me on July 7th. Kyle, your other co-host, will be interviewing me and asking some questions. So without further ado, this is the Climbing Majority Podcast. Thanks for tuning in.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Hey, Max.
What's up, Kyle? How's it going?
Thanks for everybody. It's going really good, man. Thanks everybody for tuning in again for our second episode. We're super excited about getting things rolling here. And we hope you enjoy this new episode. So in our last episode, we talked about who we both are, as a climber in the past, how we came to climbing, how it's kind of affected our lives up to this point. But I'd like to hear more about who you were as a climber on the day of your accident. How hard were you climbing? Were you climbing on ice, sport? Were you bouldering, trad mountaineering? What kind of climber were you on this day?
As far as on that day, like I'd been coming off of, so we had a really successful ice climbing season. That was amazing. Ray and I had been training, preparing for kind of summer rock climbing. That had been going really, really well. And up until this point, we had been climbing pretty darn hard. So we were probably getting out once or twice a week. And then at least like one longer day of multi-pitch climbing. And so we'd been doing lots and lots of routes on the Chief and lots of routes, particularly in the area where I had my accident. And that was the North Apron. So the majority of it up until that time, we'd been really focusing on just doing a lot of trad climbing and just getting out as much as possible. And we're really, really stoked. And, the weather was great. The summer's going well. So I think that's...
What kind of grades were you leading as a trad climber?
Probably 10A, 10B on-sighting was like the upper end of my limit. That was like, that had what I was doing for on-sighting at the time. Yeah.
What would you consider, whether you soloed or not, what was the grade that you were comfortable, quote unquote, soloing, where you just knew you weren't going to fall?
Maybe like a 5.8, 5.9. I wouldn't personally, I would not have soloed those grades. I think I've done runouts and I felt really confident and stuff like that, but I just don't have the mindset or have never really thought of myself as someone who would do that. And so that's how I would answer that question. But I could really confidently climb all the grades I was doing. There was not usually, unless it's, pretty vertical and some really clean falls, I wasn't really approaching any type of climbing being like, oh, like I'm going to totally fall and whip on this or anything like that. Like if I was maybe going to the Craig for a day and I could pick more specific climbs that catered towards like good falls and stuff, I probably would have done that a lot more. And I actually was doing that, like if I was trying to push my limit. But multi-pitching would definitely be playing it a little like safer and closer to home in grades that I felt really comfortable with.
It's smart of you. What kind of climber were you when it came to taking on risk? You say you don't solo, so we'll cross that out of the equation. You mentioned a little bit about runouts. How much of a runout were you willing to take? How much were you focused on safety? what did risk mean to you, and how much did you expose yourself to?
Yeah, great question. I think I was starting to take on more and more risk, and I was trying to increase my competency in climbing. Definitely was like pretty comfortable doing like, I would say like some reasonable runouts. But it's all dependent on, where you are, what the grade you're climbing. So obviously a huge focus of our podcast here is to address kind of the discrepancy between what you see in the media and what you see and what you're actually going to experience out climbing, right? And so if you're on like 11A, it's probably pretty vertical and you can take nice clean falls all day long. Whereas if you're on like a 5.9 or 5.8 or even some 5.10s and stuff, there could be like a pretty big ledge below you. There could be not like any like clean or vertical fall. So, those situations could get really, really dangerous really fast. And obviously, if you have the mindset of a free soloist, then it's just, you're on all the time, never falling, no support. So, hypothetically, those things shouldn't be quite as relevant because, if you fall, it doesn't matter if you deck the ledge or 200 feet below. If anything, the ledge actually might be a good thing to deck if you're soloing. Not that you'd want to fall, though. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. You bring up a funny point. We won't dive too into this because I think the topic of risk could be its own entire podcast. But you do bring up that interesting point that with trad, especially when they eat that, it's kind of like this catch-22. You have these easier grades, but a lot of the time the fall danger, even at a low, like a small amount of distance between your last piece, can be super dangerous compared to some of these more technical overhanging / vertical climbs where you could take a 20-foot whipper and be totally fine. Yeah. And it's this interesting quandary when you're a beginner climber because you can't climb 11. So you are climbing in technically these more dangerous terrains. And if you haven't built up the skill sets to climb these grades efficiently, you can get yourself hurt pretty quick. And so it's definitely in everybody's best interest to treat all these beginning multi-pitch climbs almost if you are soloing, because not falling is your best chance at not getting injured.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Yeah. With the grade, there's just so many different things that change and you have to read the terrain. But absolutely, there is this kind of paradox where it's like, well, the climb's way easier as you start off and you're starting in lower grades. But because it's easier and less vertical, your falls mean that you come in direct contact with rock in a worse way and usually quicker, right? So it's really easy to get tunnel vision and focus on like, is my placement good? And that's great. But if you fall 20 feet to your next placement, it doesn't really matter if that placement's great if you hit like 30 rocks on the way down and you're annihilated, right? So yeah, there's definitely a lot of things to consider for sure.
Yeah. What was your climbing relationship with Ray like at this point? How long have you guys been climbing together? What kind of grades are you guys climbing? Is she leading at all? And just overall, how comfortable are you two climbing together?
Yeah, so we've been climbing a whole bunch. So for the viewers out there who don't know, Ray's my girlfriend. We live together. We've been climbing together for like the better part of 2 years, which has been really, really awesome and amazing. I do the majority of the leading. Ray has definitely led a little bit, but as far as leading in trad, it's something that she's interested in getting into more, but hasn't really kind of taken that leap as much yet. So I do the majority of the leading, but as far as like a partnership, Ray and I have climbed quite a bit together and we've been through some pretty dicey and hairy situations. We both really, really care for each other, communicate, I think, really well. Yeah. And so, she's seen me at my worst and she's seen me at my best. And I think we have a really great partnership and we're pretty in line. So like at that point, like I said, we had been coming to the apron and just kind of climbing after climb after climb after climb together. And we've been through our fair share of, odd, weird situations or ropes getting stuck or gear or, endless things and just, kind of just dealt with it as they come. And I think we have a really good comfort level together. And for the day that we were climbing, we were incredibly comfortable in that terrain. We'd already climbed it before. If anything, that was part of my folly for that day, right, was kind of underestimating the situation, which we can get into that in a little bit later. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Sounds really cool. I think finding a climbing partner in general for the majority of the population can be kind of a stressful thing. I was lucky for the longest time for the first 6 years of my climbing where I had a best friend named Josh Kasumovich. And he and I, were traveling together. We lived in separate trailers together and like drove across the country and like moved across the States for over 2 years. We started a company together and we were both climbing partners as well. So the bond was like really strong and we just always had someone to climb with. And I think that that's a blessing. I think there's a lot of people out there that, struggle to find a partner in general. And it's kind of sketchy when you are looking for a new partner. You don't really know if they're safety focused or if they're kind of a loose cannon emotionally. So, being a climbing partner with somebody is a big connection. And I think that if it goes well, you can really make some lifelong friends, but it takes a lot of commonalities between the two people in order for that relationship to go well. And so, in your situation and also mine, I have a girlfriend, her name is Hannah, and she's also been climbing with me as well. And it's just nice to have someone like that to climb with on a regular basis because it's so important to have that consistency.
Yeah, it's if you're trying to climb all the time, it definitely helps dating someone who also enjoys climbing.
Yeah, let's kind of dive into the story of this day. Just kind of what I think you said it before. What day was it? What was the weather like? What was the objective? Just kind of go into this story and tell me about it.
It was July 7th, super nice day. Ray and I usually kind of prep the day before. So we live in Horseshoe Bay and it's maybe like a 40-minute drive up to Squamish. So we prep the day before, get all the gear, everything, food ready, hydration, all that kind of jazz. And then we usually like to wake up like super early in the morning because temperatures are great really early in the morning. I'm personally a morning person. I really like that kind of time of day. Getting climbing early is really nice. And then also in the summer, certain routes and stuff in Squamish can get pretty busy. So it's really nice to just like completely beat the queue, not have anybody like at your tail or dealing with other parties or anything like that. So that's kind of generally been our approach when we've been multi-pitching in Squamish. So we got up, I think like 4:35. We're probably at the Chief parking lot by about 6 a.m. And so for, listeners who haven't been to Squamish or anything, but you park in the North Apron kind of parking lot and you literally walk 100 meters into the forest in this trail, and then you're just at the base of the North Apron, which is just this, area that has this massive swath of different climbs that all lead up the apron. And it's this huge, essentially, you could call it like a granite ramp. And so, we had this very minimalistic approach. Ray and I were both feeling great. We had already climbed the climb a couple weeks prior, or at least the lower part. So we were breaking the climb up. The first part of it would be long time no see, and that's 9 pitches. And then you would have an additional 2 pitches, and that would kind of separate the Chief and break it in half, essentially. And so that first half was a climb we had already done. But the upper portion is what we actually really wanted to do that day, which was called the Ultimate Everything. And so I was actually so stoked to do this climb. I'd been like, looking at it and reading on Mountain Project and all the beta and everything, and was super interested in it. And I think the top out finishes on like a 10B. There's a crack variation. So it was kind of like right there at my limit of like on-site capability and stuff. So I personally was just super excited, really stoked. Really happy to just be trying the upper portion to this climb, and coming out at the second peak on the Chief would have been the first time that Ray and I had ever topped out there. So, stoke was pretty high and I was feeling great. Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. So you guys, you're up early, you get to the base of the climb. You had climbed this before. I think you had mentioned to me before, was it the day of the climb or the time you were climbing it before where a free soloist came up and passed you?
That was actually like just a couple weeks before. We were probably about 2 pitches below where my accident was, which is really close to the start of the climb. Like the first 2 pitches for the lower half were the cruxes of it. There's these 2 5-9 pitches. And yeah, I was kind of just at the top of the second pitch. It starts getting wider. Like it could, you're dealing with like, fist jams and hand and fist stacks and stuff. So you could probably take a number 5 cam. It's not a necessity, but could take it. So I was kind of in the wider portion of this, and like all of a sudden these soloists kind of came up behind us and were like looking for ways around me and stuff. And I'm like, meanwhile, suffering in this crack, like sweating bullets. And it was kind of funny, but they were super respectful. They were like, oh, if there's no way to get around you, like, no worries, we'll wait. Like, please don't feel any pressure. Like they were so kind and so nice. And then, I got to the anchor and, cloved in and everything. And then, and then we let them go through before Ray climbed. Obviously, they're so fast. And as one of them was passing me, was actually Tim Emmett, who I follow on Instagram. And so for any of the viewers who don't know, Tim Emmett is like he's a mountain hardware athlete. He's super, super nice guy. You can follow him on Instagram. He's climbed Helmeken Falls, which is like one of the hardest ice routes in the world. And you can go look that video up on YouTube. It's him and Will Gadd. But needless to say, he's, pretty awesome guy to see, and just kind of seeing his element and stuff. And I was a little starstruck, and he was just super nice. He was like, oh, hey mate, like, how's it going? And that's, sorry, Tim, for butchering your English accent, but he was just like so nice and kind. And then this left, and yeah, they just went on and had a great day. So that was just a couple of weeks prior to the day of my accident. Yeah.
Dang, yeah, really building the stoke for this climb that you're on now.
Yeah, totally. But yeah, so the first 2 pitches are these nice 5.9. The first one is like protected by a bolt, and then a little like this bouldery move, which pulls you onto the crack system, and you go up, and it's really short. And then the second pitch is this really easier climbing that gets to this little kind of like 5.9 roof, and then you get slotted in the crack, and it goes up, and it starts just getting wider and wider. And so that's pitch 1 and 2. And then pitch 3 and 4 are both 5.7, I believe. They're really easy, which I would say smooth climbing, super nice. And we had a 70-meter rope, and they're fairly short. So I told Ray I was going to link them both. And so I climbed the third pitch really well. And then you get at the top of the third pitch to this big kind of ledge, and there's a bolted anchor. And I just put an alpine draw that was extended and just clipped that just as like a single piece of pro essentially, and then just kept climbing through. And it's essentially this kind of very large corner system that has one splitter crack like going up, and then another splitter crack kind of closer in the corner system. And it's 5.7. And so this is the fourth pitch where I had my injury. And yeah, I was just feeling great, moving really well. Day was going great. Made it through both the crux pitches of the lower, portion of the route. And I would say like let my guard down and just was feeling awesome. And I had a cam maybe about 1/3 up the climb, and then climbed up into the more, I'd say, steeper area of the climb. And so you can imagine like you're kind of in a hand crack, and then there's kind of almost like a small little bouldery move. It's really easy and everything. And so I just kind of, as I was climbing up to there, I was like thinking to myself like, oh, I should put in a cam, and there's a perfect number 1 here. And I just did not listen to my intuition to do that at all. I just kind of second guessed myself, readjusted, moved up a little higher. And then by the time I was, essentially getting ready to place a cam and stuff, my hand just popped off, and I'm pretty sure my foot popped off as well. And so I was essentially just kind of face first into the rock, just sliding down. And it was almost like I was in slow motion. I was just like in total disbelief, in shock, and just sliding down this slab. And it felt like time slowed down for me, which I know is really cliche, but it honestly totally felt like that. And I just knew like, okay, I need to know where and what I'm sliding into. And so I kind of turned over onto my left side, and all the rock was just like, cheese gratering my whole side and my arm and everything. And as I was sliding, I could see this like pretty big granite nub below me that I was inevitably going to go into. There was no way to avoid it. And, as opposed to having a cam where I had second guessed myself, which would have totally arrested my fall, no problem. The other cam was like way farther down, and this granite nub was coming up before the cam. So I was clearly going to impact this thing before anything in the system was going to tension or anything. And lo and behold, as I was sliding into it, I knew I could either go feet first or ass first into it. And I chose feet first. I think I've discussed this with Kyle before, but through various first aid training and stuff I've done before, breaks to the pelvic girdle and the pelvic area are incredibly dangerous. There's huge amount of blood flow and supply there. And so I remember even just thinking, like, in a split second in my head while I was falling, just like, not the pelvis, like, we're not going in ass or pelvis first. And so I just put my feet out, and just, I don't think, like, I must have slid, I would guess 15 feet. And I don't feel like I was going insanely fast or anything, but it was really scary. And then I put my feet in, and just really strong, really hard impact. The rubber of the climbing shoe obviously didn't skip or bounce or anything. It just totally, like, stuck onto the rock, and then that huge impact in my ankles. And then I kind of almost went, like, head over a little bit, but I'd lost a lot of my momentum. And I was essentially just there on my hands and knees, stopped. There's a huge amount of rope splayed out because I had fallen to the last piece, but actually nothing in the system had tensioned. And so I was essentially just, probably 50 meters away from my partner, away around a corner, on my hands and knees with a huge amount of rope out in the system. And I looked at my ankles, and I knew from A, the pain I was experiencing, B, the swelling, that I pretty much almost, like, on the spot made the judgment call that both my ankles were just really, really badly broken. And lo and behold, unfortunately for me, that was very correct.
Jeez, yeah, it's harrowing. It doesn't matter how many times you hear a story like that. It just, especially if you've gone through it, just makes you sweat a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was incredibly nerve-wracking, like, unbelievably scary, extremely, extremely painful. And on top of that, there was just this kind of just shock and disbelief. I was feeling so good and confident, and to go from that contrast to just be like, I just fell run out on a 5.7. Like, how dumb am I? Just feeling that like guilt and anxiety, and just kind of just so unimpressed with myself, if that makes sense. Yeah, it was really hard. And I mean, to top all that off, like, I was just there covered in blood, completely shooken. There was some time missing from me, like, after the initial impact. So I was kind of confused if I had, like, hit my head or something, and I didn't really know. Although, like, through, kind of scanning myself and assessing myself, I felt pretty confident that, like, my spine and my head was okay. And now I had the dilemma that, my partner doesn't know I've taken a fall. Both my ankles are broken. We can't communicate. I stupidly have left my phone in Ray's bag. So I have no way of calling. So I kind of just sat there, was breathing really heavy, just started to breathe, like, really purposefully, really deep, really calm, just kind of started giving myself self-talk and saying, like, okay, you have to solve this problem. Like, nobody is coming to help you. Nobody knows you're here. Nobody even knows you're injured. So, I need to stay calm, and I need to solve this problem, and I need to be able to communicate with people.
Yeah, I think that's it's hard to do, especially in a situation like that. I mean, I think everybody has a right to just freak the fuck out and, like, have a fucking panic attack. And yeah, it's interesting that you kind of, like, almost felt that coming, and you made that, like, conscious decision to, like, that's not going to fucking help me. I have to, like, sack up and figure out what the hell to do right now, because panicking is not going to help me.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure everybody could have made that decision so rationally. So good on you.
Yeah, thanks. I really did want to kind of like freak out, and I was in enough pain. I almost just wanted to like roll around on like, the little ledge I was on kind of thing. But I kind of visualized myself just like there in this crack, this corner system, just like broken, bleeding, and just visualize that. And I was just completely alone. It was like it's going to be like 10 hours before Ray manages to jug up the line or figure something out, or search and rescue's here if you don't go do something yourself. Right. So that's what I did. I just did that self-talk, and then I kind of just assessed the situation. Luckily, that really big belay ledge that separates pitch 3 and floor was probably like 10, 15 feet below me. And so I kind of just popped my ankles up and slowly like ass first slid down really carefully and just slowly down climbed and made my way. And I mean, I use the word down climb, but like really just on my ass or on my knees with my ankles up in agony. And then I eventually made it down to that ledge. And then I crawled across that ledge with my like ankles in the air and on my knees. And there's this kind of rock at the end of the ledge that you would have to get onto to be able to peer over and get eye contact with the beginning of pitch 3. And so I kind of like got there and threw myself like on this rock with my stomach. And at that point I could see over the lip and I could see Ray. And I remember just yelling like 911, like call, 911 or like search and rescue, was just kind of yelling that at her. And of course I could just instantly see the sheer panic on her face and, just the horror of how, scared she must have been. And she just clearly did not understand that anything had happened at first, because there was nothing slacked out in the system or anything. So it was really, I could just see how, how worried she was, which was really, really hard for sure.
How'd you get her up to you?
The cruelty of the situation was like that little rock ledge that I throw myself onto. There's like a bolted anchor, and I'm a pretty big guy. I'm like 6'1", but on my knees, I could not reach the bolted anchor. And I could not step on my ankles, So I had this bolted anchor like right there, and I was just like, oh my God. And so it wasn't the biggest deal ever, but like when both your ankles are broken and you're like, completely shooken up and wrecked, I'm like, great, like I'll just make a trad anchor and equalize it and start doing that. So I made an anchor, and then I like clipped myself in, secured myself, kind of was communicating and yelling with Ray. And then she was on the phone with search and rescue. So there was kind of this issue between like I was kind of telling her like, hey, like you need to get ready to climb because like I need you to get here to help me, because like so far I'm the one dictating and controlling the situation because I need to get you here, but really like I need help. Like I just want to lie down exhausted in the ground and like whimper, and I'm having to stay here like razor focused and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so eventually she was on the phone with search and rescue. She had given them some base information, and then she hung up, and I belayed her up to me. And I really remember this. I was just in this pit of just self-loathing, like telling myself like, you are such an idiot for falling like this. Like you're such an idiot for injuring yourself and putting people in these situations. Like I was just, beating the living crap out of myself psychologically, telling myself I'm worthless, like all these terrible things. And I was just like so hurt, and just feeling like a loser, like, oh, I'm not a safe climber. Like, what's the climbing community going to think of me? What are my friends who climb going to think of me? Like all these just terrible thoughts going through my mind. Right. And I remember I saw Ray, and right as she was coming up to me, as I was belaying to her, I kind of just told her, I was like, Ray, I want to be loved, not judged. And she was just like, I love you, like we're like, we just exchanged like really nice words and stuff. And I was so happy to have her there. And then, at that point we were on a really big ledge, super secure. Ray built an anchor on the bolted anchor, like cloved herself in. I, kind of started to move, and we like splayed out the rope on the ledge, and then I laid back, and then I put my feet up. And then we tried to, I had to get my shoes off, and my ankles were both just like grotesquely swollen. And I think we actually talked about this, Kyle, where when you have a really tight climbing shoe on, but you have a really huge impact to your ankle and you break something, I'm sure it could happen if you didn't break it, but particularly if you break it, there's nowhere for all that fluid and lymph and blood and all the swelling to go. So it swells up around the brim of the ankle. And so that's how, like, originally I just knew my ankles were broken. It's like, you just look down and it's like the top part of my ankle looks like a ham hock, it's like a pig's knee or something like that. Like, it was just like, you're just looking Disgusting. At that and you're like, that is not a sprained ankle. It was like very, very clearly not a sprained ankle. Just by looking at it. So yeah. And got my shoes off, laid down, and I think by the time like Ray had got to me, I got her off belay, we were secure and trying to call search and rescue and stuff like that. Like I was almost like, I personally felt like I was going to pass out from the pain. Like, I was nauseous, just in agony, was having trouble like thinking. I was just so wrecked from all the adrenaline and everything too, was like completely shooken. I was like, there's lots of blood, and it was just this, like, for me, once I could actually just like sit back and just try and focus on mitigating the pain that I'm in currently, which obviously was not very successful, but it's easier to do that than to be trying to think of all these other things and coordinating and communicating, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you you talk about how you beat yourself up and you had all those negative thoughts. I will say, like, it kind of seems like your whole incident was more of just a freak accident. That you do have that one mistake where you should have placed that cam, and you probably could have skirted out of this entire situation in the first place. But in the grand scheme of things, I would say that your risk level was relatively minimal, and it just is like, it's just a really bad, unfortunate circumstance that you found yourself in. And yeah, it's really easy to kind of like think of all the reasons what you could have done to avoid it. And moving forward, I'm sure that they're going to play a factor, but in the moment, from an outsider's perspective, I don't really see anything where I was like, you kind of were asking for it. I think there's a lot of people out there that get themselves into situations, whether you're soloing or you're just like getting really hyped up on you trying to push the grades and you're just climbing like erratically, you're not doing it safely. And it doesn't sound like you were doing any of that. So I wouldn't beat yourself up too hard.
Yeah, try not to. I mean, ultimately, it does feel like a bit of, I don't know if freak accident's the right word, but just like a little bit of bad luck. But at the end of the day, I was linking pitches. I was feeling good. I was climbing confidently and fast, and all these things that, had I not fallen, I would have just associated with like climbing well and climbing hard.
Being a good
stuff.
Climber. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and so it's so interesting to have you have that, like, that shift, and all of a sudden it goes from like, oh yeah, like I'm climbing hard, I'm feeling good. You go from that to just being like, wow, I'm an utter failure and both my ankles are broken. So it's quite a contrast for sure. Yeah.
Reality can hit really hard or really fast.
Yeah. Yeah, no, totally. And I think it's like, it's just back to that, risk versus probability, right? It was a very low probability, but very high consequence situation, which it can be with a lot of that lower grade climbing, as we discussed, right? So yeah, and I mean, even Alex Honnold on a 5.9, it's very, very low probability, but the risk is still the same, right? Like, it doesn't matter if it's Alex Honnold or if it's me falling on a 5.9, like you're still gonna have some serious problems, right? So just ultimately mistake, error in judgment, bit of bad luck, and that's culminating in allowing myself to slide 15 feet into a granite nub and break both my ankles, right?
Mm-hmm. How did you get off the ledge? You said that you guys called search and rescue. What did that look like? Yeah,
totally. So it had already probably, I think by the time I'd fallen and gone Ray up to me, I would guess that it had already been like about an hour and a half. And so we started communicating with search and rescue. We were on this huge ledge. I believe I actually asked them and was wondering, like, hey, like, we're on a huge ledge. Like, is a helicopter viable? Can we get a helicopter? And, I mean, we can go into this discussion as well, too, of me feeling, some, like, I guess it would be the word like, feeling bad, shameful, putting people in this situation, now asking for a rescue, not even just a rescue, a helicopter rescue. And so for me, I guess when I first got to the ledge, even before I had set up belay for Ray, I had been looking over the edge and stuff and was trying to wonder, okay, like, could I set up multiple rappels to get Ray and I to the ground, or thought about rappelling the route again. And so the drop on the right, it was pretty overhanging and too far. So I didn't know if we could get a rope to reach the gully floor. And if we couldn't do that, I didn't know if we would be able to actually find somewhere to create like a trad anchor to then wrap again. So I decided, that's a terrible idea. The way that we had just climbed up is all like 5'7". And for Ray to have helped me belay down that, I was really worried that I was going to be, hitting my feet and smacking them into a lot of lower class terrain, which I think would have been completely inevitable. And then the only other option that I had thought about was search and rescue would have to do the hike up the trail, with like litter and all this rope and all this stuff, and then kind of get me into a litter and then lower me down. So yeah, I thought those were the options. And then I kind of just thought in my mind, like, I feel like this is going to be way easier if they just get a helicopter in here and just pull me off the line and then put me down right there. And, I don't dictate what they choose to do. But yeah, so that's what they decided, was to actually long line a technician in there. And so by the time we called them and given them all the information and everything like that, is probably another hour or hour plus, because they have to get the helicopter ready and their team, and they have to assess and figure out the situation, and they have to do a flyby, and eventually they dropped in a technician. His name was Tyler, who's a really, really nice guy. Kind of put me at ease a little bit and stuff. Gave me, it almost looked like a pipe that had like charcoal in it, and he poured an oil into it, and then you puff it. I think it's kind of like Entonox or laughing gas, essentially. And so I remember that helped quite a bit. He was like, "Is that working?" I was like, "I'm pretty sure I'm really high, but I'm still in lots of pain." It was like, it actually did help a lot, but like, I just remember still being in agony, but I was just also super high now,
Yeah. That's a bummer. It seems like the pain was just so unrelenting for you.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like my personal situation was not like that. I definitely had relief, quite a significant amount of relief, within an hour or so. And it doesn't seem like you had that even with the laughing gas.
Yeah, no, like we could jot it down to so many different things, like genetics, pain tolerance, maybe the way it hit, fluid buildup, like whatever it is. I'm not a doctor or a surgeon. I'm sure somebody could have some reasonings, but yeah, my personal experience in that was that it was just pure agony that did not let up at all. Like even just lying on my back with my feet up, not touching the rock, I was just like sitting there breathing, trying to meditate to even just get like 2 seconds of relief from the agony I was in. Yeah. And so eventually Tyler came in and he long lined us off the side. And we landed in the school because like the highway's like right there. And paramedics got me, and I went to Squamish Hospital, got a whole bunch of imaging and x-rays done and stuff. And then they told me that my calcaneus was broken in like 3 different places. My navicular was broken. That was on my right foot. And then the left foot, the malleolus, so the inside malleolus of my tibia had been completely like broken off, rotated. My deltoid ligament was fully ruptured. And they think that I might have dislocated my left ankle. And so that's kind of what I was told, and that they were transferring me to Lionsgate Hospital, which is in North Vancouver. So that's like probably like a 50-minute to an hour drive. And eventually I got transferred there and got surgery and spent 2 days in the hospital, and then was discharged, and the rest is history.
How many screws or plates did you get in each ankle?
Yeah, so I've got 3 bone sutures, I think, on the left and 2 screws on the left. And then the right, they didn't operate on. So the navicular just had a crack in it, and the calcaneus, the way it broke essentially is when I went into the rock, if you can view your calcaneus as like a big ball or whatever, there's like a huge flap at the bottom that had been broken and peeled up. And then there was 2 really long Y fractures. So essentially the middle of my calcaneus was like almost a floating body, essentially. Like it hadn't collapsed into the subtalar joint, but it was so close to doing that. My surgeon actually like told me, he's like, it was good that like you didn't stand on it or do anything, because it was so vulnerable to actually having that collapse into the subtalar articular surface, which would have been like really, really bad for me. But yeah, so those were the breaks, and with the calcaneus, the way the flap was, essentially the body can just actually fill that in with bone, and the nature and of my break and where it was, they just said, this is actually going to heal to a really like normal degree. And then we don't have to do anything invasive or surgery or all these things, which can have its own complications and stuff. And so, yeah, lo and behold, that's what it's doing. I still think I have a little bit of a hole in it, but it's pretty much healed now.
Do you think you have any sort of vertical displacement of the rear portion of your calcaneus? Because if it cracked like that Y fracture, it almost seems like the back would lift up almost. Do you think that it is displaced a little bit?
I don't actually really feel like it's displaced at all. I really don't get that much issue with my calcaneus or anything. Ironically, I didn't break it, but the top articulate surface where the tibia meets the talus is actually like more damaged and sensitive and hurting for me. So far, like my calcaneus feels pretty good. Yeah.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Crazy.
Yeah.
So where are you now with your injury? How long has it been since the surgery? And kind of tell me what you're sitting at right now with what you got.
So July 9th, I think, was my surgery date. So December 9th would be 5 months, and we're November 30th. So we're just short of 5 months here. Like I'm standing, I'm walking, I'm feeling okay. I've been talking to Kyle for, people have been listening and stuff here. Like I was dealing with some like really, really bad depression for the last couple weeks. And, my back's really tight from kind of like limping. So there's just like slowly like, things that you have to deal with through like a rehabilitation period. And for me, I'm just personally having a little bit of a downturn, but in general, I'm walking, I'm moving. Throughout the process, I was doing lots of band work, lots of physio, yoga, stretching. I did a lot of fingerboarding, really tried to just focus on, gaining finger strength, because that's something I could totally do. But yeah, I spent, almost 2 months? What would it have been for like 6 weeks in a wheelchair almost, having the 2 boots and stuff, which also, side note for anybody listening, if you ever break both your ankles, you'll have the pleasure of just having people stare at you everywhere you go, because everybody is so curious of just how did you break 2 ankles?
Yeah.
And it's really just or the amount of times like, oh, I'm having a better day than you. You're like thanks, exactly. Random person at the shopping mall, or like the grocery store, like
people are like, oh, both ankles, huh? That's rough. It's like, for sure, all the little side comments. It's hilarious,
for sure. And just so many people want to know what happened to you. So
for sure.
It's pretty interesting.
How has Ray been affected these last few months and like supporting you through this recovery process? And like the sheer trauma from the incident in general.
Yeah. I think the situation was really, really hard for her, obviously. It was really traumatic, really just the rescue and everything that happened. That was just so much for her to go through. So I'm sure she's still dealing with some residual stuff from that and everything. We're doing well. It's been obviously a stressful quite a few weeks, and for Ray, her, the impact that my actions had did not end once we got rescued. Like Ray literally waited on me hand over fist, took care of me, got things for me, did whatever I needed, picked me up from the hospital, helped clean out the commode that I could use because I couldn't even get in the toilet for the first little bit. Like just so many things that I never thought I would experience, and so, so grateful for her. And, it's kind of comical, like to anybody listening. If you're going to break both your ankles, make sure you have, girlfriend, boyfriend, lover, whatever at your house when you do it. Cause I could not imagine having to go through that on your own, by yourself.
I don't think it's possible.
Yeah, honestly, you just become so reliant on other people in that situation very quickly. So yeah, just so grateful to have her there and to be taking care of me, and incredibly, annoyed with myself that I put her in that situation, but nevertheless, it is what it is. And yeah, just so grateful to have her there. And I know I've been having trouble lately, like envisioning myself climbing, and like getting outside and climbing. And I know that will pass, but I think that's something really interesting to me. It's almost kind of, I'm just like the idea of, putting myself through that, what I would have called normally very much needed pain and physical exercise right now. I just don't even want to think about it. I'm just like, oh man, I just want to get back to moving well and feeling good and getting my legs back and stuff. And so, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that brings me to the question, like, what does your climbing career look like to you now? Are you like visualizing an approach to getting back to the sport? If at all, it kind of sounds like you might be just kind of putting it on the back burner for now.
Yeah. I think right now, just like the last couple of weeks is like prior to about 3 weeks ago, I was actually, like I said, training really hard, focusing on finger strength. I was really motivated to climb again. And I know I will be, but just the last couple of weeks, when you're feeling really depressed and then you're also dealing with a lot of chronic pain, for me personally, I get a lot of like psychosomatic stuff. So, like you're depressed and you're tired, and because you're tired, you can deal with pain less. So then the pain you have on a normal daily basis is hurting way more. And it's kind of like this negative loop or feedback loop you get into, or me personally, I'm just talking about myself. And so when you're feeling kind of that crummy, it's pretty hard to be like envisioning myself like jamming my feet into cracks and like agony, like loving it. So it's been hard to visualize myself climbing like that. But no, I don't think climbing for me is over, to say the least. It's such a huge part of my life. I still watch tons of climbing videos. The Alpinist came out, which I was so stoked to see and stuff. So I think for right now, like the process of actually envisioning myself climbing like I used to, and having the hopes and aspirations I did, I think those are just a little bit on the back burner, but not gone, if that makes sense. But it's also made me kind of have a different level of appreciation for just risk, and also understanding that, like, I love climbing and I want to climb for a long time. Like, I don't want to repeat a situation like this again. This has been a lot, and has a lot of consequences for longevity in your life and your joints and articulate surfaces, and yada yada yada. I don't know how many more times Ray's gonna stand by me if I keep breaking both my ankles.
Yeah, it's actually funny. I just had the same conversation with Hannah. I was like, that was a one ticket kind of deal. Like, you break your calcaneus again and I'm out of here.
Yeah. So yeah, I think I'm still excited on climbing. I still love climbing. It's just hard to truly envision myself putting myself through like the sharp end right now, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, it's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely a lot.
But honestly,
I've had like horror stories, horror visions of like falling and re-breaking my same bone like right now, and God, it would just be, it would be so fucked. It would be the most psychologically traumatic experience ever to like just be right back at ground zero again. And not even ground zero. It's even more effed than it was before.
Yeah. Yeah. No, oh my God, I could not even imagine. Also, just, the aspect, like when you go through surgeries and stuff and opioids and drugs and all these things, like it's also a risk on that avenue, right? There's your mental health, there's taking prescription medications and pain medications that you don't want to get addicted to. Like it just affects so many aspects of your life. And it's so easy to just focus on the actual trauma aspect. Like, oh, I have broken ankles. It's like, yeah, but your ankles have also like broken your identity, which is you as a climber. And that's having psychological impacts. And those psychological impacts are psychosomatic. So there's physical things coming out of them. It affects your sleep. It affects your relationships. And also, for anybody out there who, goes through traumatic sports injuries, as I'm sure there's so many people out there who have, it is like a bit of an identity crisis. Like I used to go, run or climb or hike because I love getting outside. It takes the angst out of life. I love being in nature and all these things. So, you also have that avenue of that, like kind of, mountain therapy is now gone, in the time where you wish you could have it most. So it's it's hard. It's challenging.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot more behind the scenes that goes on than people hear about. I mean, I think that you don't even really hear about injuries that much in the climbing community at all, really. At least I haven't. I mean, you hear them kind of every now and then, but when it comes down to actually hearing these stories about what these people are literally going through, I think it's been quite misrepresented.
Yeah, I agree with you. I feel like you either see pros pull the A1 pulley and that's that, or you hear of people dying. But like I personally don't know of stuff in between the middle, It's like I don't really see that, and people's experience and getting back to climbing and stuff. So yeah, it's a long road and it's hard.
Yeah, I think that it'll be cool for everybody listening. I think that we're both hopefully going to be able to give everybody a taste about what that side of recovery is. I think we touch base a little bit every podcast about kind of where we're at and what kind of recovery process we're going through. And I think the stories aren't going to end anytime soon. I think even, 6 months from now, we're still going to have something to say that's going to relate to kind of how we're recovering from this incident. So it's definitely a really long process and a super long road. So yeah, we hope that we can shed some light on this kind of more forgotten area of sports injuries.
Yeah. Well said, Kyle. I think slow and steady wins the race.
Yeah, for sure.
That old proverb, but it's so true in so many aspects of life.
Yeah. What do you think your biggest takeaway from your accident was?
Yeah, that's a good question. Biggest takeaway from the accident, I think don't second guess your intuition when it comes to safety. More safety is probably better than less, if that makes sense. So, I mean, that's not always the case because sometimes speed or moving fast, but I think generally, like if you're multi-pitching moderates on rock and you have the intuition to like, feeling like, oh, this is a little like dicey or something and I want to throw in a cam, don't second guess that intuition, put a good piece of protection in and then, coalesce your thoughts from there or, just move on and keep climbing. But I think ultimately that was the biggest thing for me. Don't second guess myself.
Yeah, it's good advice. I think that, it sucks when you have to look back at those things and you just blatantly see the decision that you skipped. It opens up the door for regret, and it's a bad place to be. Yeah. So I think the last little topic that we kind of skipped over was just, you had talked about your mindset and what you were thinking about right after the injury. And you were talking about feeling kind of like beating yourself up and feeling really sorrowful. And, I personally find that pretty interesting because in my accident, my initial reaction, other than just screaming out of terror because I had just broken my feet, was fear from a financial sense. I live in America here and healthcare costs are really expensive. And, it's pretty well known out here. I've even had a friend who cased a snowboard jump and blew both his knees out. And, he had to file bankruptcy because his medical bills were just like hundreds of thousands of dollars. And, that was definitely something that went through my head the instant I got injured. Was just like, crap, how am I going to pay for this? What the hell is going to happen? What's my life going to be like? Am I going to have to deal with this debt the rest of my life? And it's a really real thing out here. So it was definitely interesting that you had the time to reflect on just kind of your own personal mental emotions regarding, your burden to everybody else and everything. And I think that it's as kind of rough as those emotions you were going through, it's kind of a cool place to be because you were able to kind of feel those things and not have to worry about the financial consequences of this mistake that you made. And, I don't know, I haven't done a lot of research on universal healthcare or the benefits over one version of the other, but I'll tell you right now, in between the both of our situations, I'd much rather be in your shoes. So yeah, it's just an interesting perspective that you gave. And I think that it'll be cool for the audience here. I think that we'll have a lot of different people from Canada and from the United States, and just want to bring up the discrepancy between the two systems and what goes through people's minds when they do go through incidents like this in different social economical structures.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point that you raised, Kyle. And it is very interesting, right? Like for me, when the service it's not free, like it's paid through people and taxpayers' dollars. So the funds are being allocated in a different way to pay for it. But essentially for me in that moment, I, as an individual, am not taking on the burden of paying for that. So I'm more so from the perspective of just feeling, shame and guilt that I'm putting people in a position where they have to endanger themselves to come help me. And I'm also being a drain on society because I'm now using taxpayers' dollars to essentially help me, which I'm both incredibly grateful and thankful for both the search and rescue people and, that. But it is interesting and conflicting. And just for context, for anybody who isn't familiar with like Canada's system and stuff, it is more of a social, socialist kind of system of healthcare. It is paid through tax dollars. So I think in total, what I paid for was like the boot and crutches, and I think my ambulance ride, which was like under $150 total, is what I probably had to pay as an initial fee, right? And I mean, obviously, getting into a debate between like a capitalist system and a socialist system, like there's things we can go on all day long. I don't think we're trying to get political here. So there's pros and cons to both systems. But, I do agree with Kyle, for me to not have to worry about that, when I broke my ankles and fell and was alone there, my first thought was not, I'm going to be bankrupt. It was like, I don't want to die and I really want and need help, and I need it like soon. So yeah, definitely very.
I will say that, as expensive as the healthcare system is here, there are ways to help your situation. And a couple of those is accident insurance. You can get like spot insurance to cover up to a certain amount of dollars of coverage. And you can buy that on a day-to-day basis, and it's super cheap. So if you're going out on like a big multi-pitch day, fork out the $20 or whatever, and cover your trip for that weekend. And then on top of that, the AAC, their membership 2.0 right now covers, I think, up to either $30,000 or $50,000 in rescue insurance. Or no, it's $200,000. It's $200,000 in rescue insurance. They increased it after the membership 2.0. So, I mean, that's a huge amount of money. And I think that, if you do find yourselves in these situations, the key is just to be prepared and, make that initial investment and secure your financial situation before you go out in these missions. And yes, it does kind of cost you a little bit money up front, but the system's not there to support you if you don't make these decisions up front. So if you're in America, think ahead. Injuries can happen to you. Take out the accident insurance, join the AAC, get your membership 2.0, and just have that safety net there for you. So you don't have to worry about just being totally effed when you do get into even like a small injury like this. It's just better to be covered. And I think that's basically how the capitalistic system works out here, is just think ahead, plan ahead, cover your ass. And so you don't have to find yourself in these situations where you're just like shit out of luck and tons of debt.
Yeah, great point, Kyle, and really well said. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. This concludes today's episode. If you have any questions or comments, both Kyle and I can be reached via email or social media, and our information is included in the links provided. Let's continue to have an open discussion, share information, and provide support to our amazing climbing community. Remember to subscribe, like, and share this podcast with your friends. Thanks for listening. I'm Max Carrier.
I'm Kyle Brocksterman.
And this is the Climbing Majority Podcast.